Do you want to invoke evocative imagery when we're playing these role-playing games? Or do you want to simply roll some dice and get on with the show? How's it going, everyone, and welcome to No Fun Alloved's How to GM series, and today we're going to be talking about role-playing versus streamlining. Something you need to know before you start running that game for those players is, do you want to role-play things out heavily, or do you want to go ahead and just streamline some things and get on with the show? And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take, for example, when you roll to hit something. You could simply streamline things and say, hey, roll to attack, in which case they roll to attack. Alright, they rolled high enough. Then you go ahead and say, roll damage, and then they roll damage. Okay, the enemy takes this much damage. Next. That is very streamlined. It keeps the game going, it makes it quick, and you can get on with other people's turns and get the show on the road. However, some people like to take it upon themselves to add some imagery to these rolling of dice. Instead of just saying roll to hit, you say, as you rush up to the enemy, sword in hand, you raise it high above and swing down, roll to attack. And if they roll high enough, as you bring the sword down, it glances across their chest. Go ahead and roll damage. And once they roll damage, your sword gets a glancing blow. You see blood drawn, but not much. Their vigor is hardly damaged. You see, taking a little bit of time to invoke that imagery there is pretty awesome. It does put you in the mindset of what's going on. You can go ahead and close your eyes and imagine you're right there. But you see, here is the issue with that. We can go ahead and take the rolling to hit and rolling to damage, and we can see that that takes up next to no time. Versus if we go ahead and use that imagery there, yeah, it keeps us in the moment. It makes us feel like we're there, but you see that takes time. And the more time you're taking on the aspect of rolling dice, then is less time spent doing other things. You need to be aware of what you want out of the game, but also what the players want out of the game. Do they want to get combat over with so they can go ahead and talk to the other NPCs in the world or to each other? Do they want to spend the next 2 hours of their life fighting hardcore in this combat and being able to paint a picture when it's all done? Now, mind you, that is just a pure combat sake. Let's go ahead and take this over to a roleplay element. When we have those roleplay elements, we could go ahead and sit there as the NPC and say, well, years ago, there was a plight in this land, and oh, it was horrific, and da-da-da. You could go ahead and just start role-playing it out, bring out the voice acting, putting in some of your own flair and charm, or you could simply say, the old man tells you about this, and go ahead and slide them a piece of information, or go ahead and give them some exposition. Once again, this really comes down to the individuals you have at the table. Do you want a game where you are getting into character and a voice all the time? Or do you want a game where you're getting the information pertinent to the adventure and you go ahead and act upon it? And of course, this isn't just coming from a GM perspective. Your players could be doing the exact same thing. They could go ahead and describe in immense detail and in voice and in character what they are doing. They could go ahead and say exactly what is on their minds and their little body motions and what they say. And as they say it, they go ahead and put a little bit of emphasis on certain words more than others. Or they could go ahead and streamline the whole thing and say, my character says this. Now, is there any one right way to do it? No, absolutely not. You could go ahead and run a campaign where no one does any voices and you don't waste time acting out the dice. You either say you succeed or you fail. That's the end of story. Or you could go ahead and roleplay it out hardcore. You could go ahead and go grognardy, old school style and just keep on hacking and slashing. Or you could go ahead and have a super duper immense critical role style campaign where there is a lot of roleplay. Or something that I strongly would suggest is having a happy medium. Having it where you go over the things you don't particularly care about, but you dive into the things that you really do. Now, as previously mentioned, there is no one right way to do it, but I promise you there is a wrong way to do it. This is something that you need to talk to your players about. This is something that you're going to understand once you play with these players long enough, whether they fall into one category or the other, or they like a mix between the two. I have GM'd for many different types of people, and I can tell you that sometimes it just comes down to the individual. Some people aren't comfortable role-playing, and that's fine. Some people like role-playing so much that they take up the whole time role playing, and that's fine too. But you need to have a happy medium between the party. If you have someone in the party that role plays way too much, and then you have someone that doesn't role play at all, then they're kind of going to be at odds with each other. You need to understand what everyone wants out of the game, and you can go ahead and formulate a group that fits perfectly with that. As previously mentioned, I like a good combination between the two. Sometimes in combat, yeah, of course, if it is a super duper epic fight and they're going up against a big bad villain, then I'm going to narrate every little detail. But if the party is just going up against some random encounter and the stakes aren't that high, then yeah, let's go ahead and get the show on the road. Same thing with the roleplay side of things. Yeah, if they're talking to their beloved NPC, then of course I'm going to get into voice, I'm going to get into character, I'm going to be waving my arms about, I'm going to be speaking to them like an actor on stage. But if they're just meeting some random commoner and they're asking for directions, I'm just going to say, yeah, the commoner tells you to take a left. You don't need to have one way or the other. You can go ahead and have a happy marriage between the two. But I'm not going to tell you which way is best. I can't tell you which way is best. You can go ahead and tell me which way is best for you, though. So go ahead and tell me, do you prefer streamlining things, where you go ahead and cut off the fat, so that way you're spending less time doing frivolous things and getting along with the adventure? Or do you prefer role-playing, in which case then a lot more time is going to be invested in there. But of course, if you are into that role-play stuff, then it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be well worth the investment. Or are you somewhere in between? Do you maybe go 60-40, 70-30, maybe it's even 50-50? Who knows? Go ahead and tell me these things because I want to know. That is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to all my amazing patrons up here. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. That is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.